Myth number 7. He's too angry. He needs to learn anger management skills. A few years ago, the partner of one of my clients went through an ordeal where her 12-year-old son from a previous marriage disappeared for more than 48 hours. For 2 days, Mary Beth's heart was beating faster and faster as she drove around town looking for her son, made panicked phone calls to everyone she knew, and dropped her son's photograph at police departments, newspapers, and radio stations. She barely slept. Meanwhile, her new husband, Ray, who was in one of my groups, was slowly building to a boil inside. Toward the end of the second day, he finally burst out, yelling at her, "I am so sick of being ignored by you. It's like I don't even exist. Go F yourself." When people conclude that anger causes abuse, they are confusing cause and effect. Ray was not abusive because he was angry. He was angry because he was abusive. Abusers carry attitudes that produce fury. A non-abusive man would not expect his wife to be taking emotional care of him during a crisis of this gravity. In fact, he would be focused on what he could do for her and on trying to find the child. It would be futile to teach Ray to take a time out to punch pillows, take a brisk walk, or concentrate on deep breathing, because his thinking process will soon get him enraged again. In Chapter 3, you will see how and why an abuser's attitudes keep him furious. When a new client says to me, "I'm in your program because of my anger," I respond, "No, you're not. You're here because of your abuse." Everybody gets angry. In fact, most people have at least occasional times when they are too angry, out of proportion to the actual events or beyond what is good for their health. Some give themselves ulcers and heart attacks and hypertension, but they don't necessarily abuse their partners. In Chapter 3, we'll take a look at why abusive men tend to be so angry and why, at the same time, their anger isn't really the main problem. The abuser's explosive anger can divert your attention from all the disrespect, irresponsibility, talking over you, lying, and other abusive and controlling behaviors that he exhibits, even at times when he isn't especially upset. Is it anger that causes such a high proportion of abusers to cheat on their partners? Does an abuser's rage cause him to conceal for years the fact that a former girlfriend went into hiding to get away from him? Is it a form of explosiveness when your partner pressures you into dropping your friendships and spending less time with your siblings? No. Perhaps his loudest, most obvious, or most intimidating forms of abuse come out when he's angry, but his deeper pattern is operating all the time. Myth number 8. He's crazy. He's got some mental illness that he should be medicated for. When a man's face contorts in bitterness and hatred, he looks a little insane. When his mood changes from elated to assaultive in the time it takes to turn around, his mental stability seems open to question. When he accuses his partner of plotting to harm him, he seems paranoid. It is no wonder that the partner of an abusive man would come to suspect that he was mentally ill. Yet the great majority of my clients over the years have been psychologically normal. Their minds work logically. They understand cause and effect. They don't hallucinate. Their perceptions of most life circumstances are reasonably accurate. They get good reports at work. They do well in school or training programs. And no one other than their partners and children thinks that there's anything wrong with them. Their value system is unhealthy, not their psychology. Much of what appears to be crazy behavior in an abuser actually works well for him. We already met Michael, who never broke his own stuff, and Marshall, who did not believe his own jealous accusations. In the pages ahead, you will encounter many more examples of the method behind the abuser's madness. You will also learn how distorted his view of his partner is, which can make him appear emotionally disturbed, and where these distortions spring from. The most recent research shows that even in physically violent abusers, the rate of mental illness is not high. Several of my brutal battering clients have had psychological evaluations, and only one of them was found to have a mental illness. At the same time, some of my clients whom I have believed to be truly insane have not necessarily been among the most violent. Research does indicate that the most extreme physical batterers, the ones who choke their partners to unconsciousness, who hold guns to their heads, who stalk and kill, have increased rates of mental illness. But there is no particular mental health condition that is typical of these severe batterers. They can have a range of diagnoses, including psychosis, borderline personality, manic depression, antisocial personality, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and others. And even among the most dangerous abusers, there are many who do not show clear psychiatric symptoms of any kind. How can all these different mental illnesses cause such similar behavioral patterns? The answer is they don't. Mental illness doesn't cause abusiveness any more than alcohol does. What happens is rather that the man's psychiatric problem interacts with his abusiveness to form a volatile combination. If he is severely depressed, for example, he may stop caring about the consequences his actions may cause him to suffer, which can increase the danger that he will decide to commit a serious attack against his partner or children. A mentally ill abuser has two separate, though interrelated, problems, just as the alcoholic or drug-addicted one does. The basis reference book for psychiatric conditions, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, includes no condition that fits abusive men well. Some clinicians will stretch one of the definitions to apply it to an abusive client, intermittent explosive disorder, for example, so that insurance will cover his therapy. However, this diagnosis is erroneous if it's made solely on the basis of his abusive behavior. A man whose destructive behaviors are confined primarily or entirely to intimate relationships is an abuser, not a psychiatric patient. Two final points about mental illness. First, I occasionally hear someone who's discussing a violent abuser say, "He must be delusional to think he can get away with this." But unfortunately, it often turns out that he can get away with it, as we discuss in chapter 12, so his belief is not a delusion at all. Second, I've received just a few reports of cases in which an abuser's behavior has improved for a while as a result of taking medication prescribed by a psychiatrist. His overall abusiveness hasn't stopped, but the most devastating or terrifying behaviors have eased. Medication is not a long-term solution, however, for two important reasons. One, abusers don't like to be medicated because they tend to be too selfish to put up with the side effects, no matter how much the improvement may benefit their partners. So they almost always quit the medication after a few months. The medication then can become another tool to be used in psychological abuse. For example, the abuser can stop taking his pills when he's upset with her, knowing that this will make her anxious and afraid. Or when he wants to strike out at her dramatically, he may deliberately overdose himself, creating a medical crisis. 2. No medication yet discovered will turn an abuser into a loving, considerate, appropriate partner. It will just take the edge off his absolute worst behaviors, if it even does that. If your abusive partner is taking medication, be aware that you are only buying time. Take advantage of the more peaceful period to get support in your own healing. Begin by calling a program for abused women.